Hello sports fans, welcome to Super Sports Central. Today, we're going to be going over Week 18 NFL predictions. So last week in Week 17, I had a pretty solid week going 9-7, and that brings my record on the season to 168-87. But we'll start things off this week with a couple games we have Saturday, beginning with the Panthers at the Buccaneers. And this is a huge game because the winner of this game is pretty likely to win the NFC South and make the playoffs. Although there is a scenario where the Panthers make the playoffs regardless of what happens here, and that would happen if the Falcons beat the Saints, because then the Buccaneers and Falcons would be tied, and that would create some kind of tiebreaker that would prevent the Buccaneers from winning the division. But this game still should be pretty good. For the Panthers, they're 8-8, although coming off a pretty bad loss to the Seahawks, and in that game, Bryce Young threw for just 54 yards. And then for the Buccaneers, they're also coming off a loss, as they lost the Dolphins 20-17 last week, and they've not been playing that well, as they've lost 4 games in a row. But the offense for the Panthers, they're not great, as they're scored just 18.6 points per game, and obviously they were terrible last week. But they face a Buccaneers defense that's not the greatest, as they're allowing 24.8 points per game. Then on the other side, the offense for the Buccaneers is decent, as they're scoring 22.8 points per game, but they've not been playing that well, as they've scored more than 20 points just one time over the last 5 games. And they match up against a Carolina defense that's okay, as they're allowing 22.8 points per game. But this is a tough game to predict because I really don't think either team is that good. Now, I've already seen these teams play once, that game in Carolina, and the Panthers won 23-20. Now, I don't really think the Panthers are good enough to sweep the Buccaneers, because I don't really think either team in this situation is that good. But I'm still going to take the Panthers to get the win. I just think with how these teams are playing at this point in the season, they're the slightly better team, because the Buccaneers just look so bad recently. I'm going to take the Panthers to get the win. I'm not too confident with the pick, but I've got the Panthers with the win, and winning the NFC South for the first time since 2015, and I've got them with the win by a score of 22-19. Moving to the game on Saturday night, we've got the Seahawks at the 49ers. And we'll be having a live watch for this game starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Saturday, so I hope to see you guys there. But this is another huge game, and the winner of this game is going to end up being the NFC West champion and also getting the top seed in the NFC. And that'll be big for both teams, but especially the 49ers. Because if they end up getting home field advantage in the playoffs, they won't have to leave home again this season, and that includes the Super Bowl, which is in San Francisco. But this is going to be a great game, and this is a really good matchup. But the offense for the Seahawks, they're great. They're second best in the NFL, putting up 29.1 points per game. And they face a 49ers defense that's pretty good, allowing 22.4 points per game. Although the Niners defense hasn't been great as of late. As last week they couldn't stop the Bears, allowing 38 points. And the week before they allowed 27 against the Colts. Now on the flip side, the offense for the 49ers, they've been playing really well. They've scored over 40 points in back-to-back games. And Brock Purdy's had at least 5 touchdowns in both those games. But the 49ers offense, they don't face any elite Seahawks defense, as they're second best in the NFL, allowing just 18.1 points per game. But this is a really tough game to predict, and I think this is going to be a very good game. Now, even though both teams are pretty good defensively, I do think we're going to see some points scored, because both teams are good offensively, and their offenses have also been playing very well. But this game can really go either way. Now, the 49ers, they're at home, I would win them, but I'm going to take the Seahawks to get the win. With how the 49ers defense has been playing lately, I trust the Seahawks defense a little bit more. Plus, the Seahawks are one of the best teams on the road in the NFL, as they've lost just 2 road games since the start of last season. So I'm going to take the Seahawks to get the win, to beat the 49ers, and I think this is a great game, but I've got the Seahawks with the win by a score of 30-26. And moving to the rest of the games all on Sunday, beginning with the Saints at the Falcons. So this is a quietly big game. Now obviously, as I said before, if the Falcons end up winning this game, it doesn't matter who wins between the Panthers and Buccaneers, and the Panthers win the division. But this game should be decent, because the Falcons, they're 7-9, and coming off a big upset win over the Rams, and Saints, they're 6-10, and playing pretty well with 4 straight wins. And a big reason Saints have been better as of late is Tyler Shough, as on the 4-game win streak for the Saints, he's averaging 264 passing yards per game. But Tyler Shough and the Saints offense, they face a Falcons defense that's not the greatest, allowing 24 points per game, but they are pretty good against the pass, allowing just 198 passing yards per game, and they also picked off Matthew Stafford 3 times last week. Now on the other side, the offense for the Falcons is not the greatest, which is about 21 points per game, and they face the Saints defense that's playing pretty well, as on their 4-game win streak, they're allowing just 17 points per game. But this is another game that could go either way, but I'm going to take the Saints here to win their 5th game in a row, and the season on a really strong note, and I've got the Saints with the win by a score of 24-19. Moving on, I've got the Browns at the Bengals. So the Browns, they're 4-12, and coming off a huge upset win over the Steelers, winning 13-6, and the Bengals, they're 6-10, and they've won back-to-back games. And a big reason the Bengals have won back-to-back games has been the offense, as they scored 37 last week and 45 the week before. But the Bengals offense, they get a much tougher matchup this week against the Browns defense that is quite good, as they're second best in the NFL, allowing just 278 total yards per game. Plus, last week they were great against the Steelers, not allowing a touchdown. Now, on the other side, the offense for the Browns, they're not great. They're scoring just 16 points per game, but they also face a Bengals defense that's one of the worst in the NFL. But it's a pretty interesting matchup here because it's strength versus strength, weakness versus weakness, with obviously the Bengals offense and the Browns defense being the strengths. But I'm going to take the Bengals to get the win. The offense, they've been playing really well. I think they can find success even against a good defense. And even though the Bengals defense isn't great, I don't think the Browns offense is good enough to keep up. So I've got the Bengals with the win by a score of 27-21. Moving on, we've got the Packers at the Vikings. This game really does not mean anything. The Vikings, they've been eliminated from playoff contention for a few weeks. And the Packers, they've locked up the 7th seed in the NFC for the 3rd straight year. And they've got nothing to play for. And because the Packers have nothing to play for, they're going to be resting starters. So a 3rd-string quarterback, Clayton Tune, will get the start at quarterback. And it'll be his 2nd career start, after he also started a game with the Cardinals in 2023. But Clayton Tune gets a really tough matchup against a Vikings defense that's playing really well, as they've forced 10 turnovers over the last 4 games, and on their 4-game win streak, they're allowing just 12 points per game. Now, on the flip side, the offense for the Vikings will have J.J. McCarthy back for this game, after he missed last week's game with a hand injury, and McCarthy and the Vikings offense, they also face the Packers defense that's pretty good. Although, last week they were awful as they allowed over 40 against the Ravens and could not stop the run. But I think this is going to be a low-scoring game because these are 2 good defenses, and I don't really think either offense is that good, especially with the Packers playing a 3rd-string quarterback. But I'm going to take the Vikings to get the win here. They're at home, they've got the slightly better defense. Plus, even though J.J. McCarthy is not very good, I do think he's better than Clayton Tune, so I've got the Vikings with the win in a defensive game, 16-10. Up next, we've got the Cowboys at the Giants. So the Cowboys, they're 7-8-1, and the Giants, they're 3-13. But the Giants actually got a win last week as they beat the Raiders, and they no longer have the 1st pick after that win. Now, the Giants could get back there if they lose and the Raiders win, although that doesn't seem like the most likely scenario. But the Giants, this could be an interesting game, because the offense looked pretty good, and I think that could continue, because Cowboys' defense isn't exactly great. Now, on the flip side, the offense for the Cowboys, they're 4th best in the league with 28.4 points per game, but the Giants' defense has also been a lot better since they fired defense coordinator Shane Bowen. As since they fired him, they're allowing 22 points per game. Now, that's still not amazing, but it's definitely a lot better than what it was. But I definitely think there's a chance the Giants can pull off the upset here, because the offense, I think they can score against a pretty bad defense, and I think the defense, because they're playing a lot better, could slow down this Cowboys offense. Plus, we've already seen the Giants nearly beat the Cowboys early in the season, and that was also when they were starting Russell Wilson, and they only lost by 3 in overtime. So now the Giants, they're at home, they can definitely get the win. But as a Giants fan, I don't necessarily want to win this game. I want to pick as high as possible in the draft and hopefully trade down and get a good package. But I'm not going to take the Giants to get the win. I'll take the Cowboys 27-23, but the upset definitely a possibility. Moving on, we've got the Titans at the Jaguars. So this game shouldn't really be that close, because the Titans, they're 3-13, and they're not very good, and the Jaguars, they're 12-4 and on a 7-game win streak. And the Jaguars, they're also clinched the AFC South this week with a win, and they actually could end up getting up to the top seed. Now, that's pretty unlikely, but it's definitely a possibility. And I believe I actually read somewhere that the Jaguars can actually finish with every seed in the AFC except the 4 seed. But it's definitely most likely they'll end up at the 3 seed, because that's where they are right now. But the offense for the Jaguars, they've been great, as on their 7-game win streak, they're scoring over 32 points per game. And I think that's going to continue, because they face the Titans' defense that's allowing over 27 points a game. Now, the offense for the Titans, they've been a little bit better recently, as over their last 4 games, they're scoring 27 points per game, and Cam Ward has thrown at least 2 touchdowns in all 4 of those games. But they also face a pretty good Jaguar defense, allowing 20 points per game. But I'm going to take the Jaguars to get the win here. They've been playing really well. I think that continues. And I think they beat the Titans pretty easily, 31-17. And they head into the playoffs as one of the hottest teams in the NFL. Moving on, we've got the Colts at the Texans. The Texans, they're 11-5. And right now they've got the 5 seed in the AFC. And right now they would be on the road in the first round. But if they win and the Jaguars lose the Titans, they could have a home game by winning the division. But the Jaguars, they now face the Colts team that's 8-8, and they've not been very good, as they've lost 5 games in a row. And the Colts, they're actually making quarterback switch here and starting rookie quarterback Riley Leonard, and it makes a lot of sense considering they don't have anything to play for, being eliminated from playoff contention. But I love Riley Leonard as a Notre Dame fan. I love seeing what he can do last year, taking us to a national championship game. But I don't really think he's going to have much success this week, because this Texans defense is extremely tough for any quarterback, especially a quarterback who makes his first start in the NFL. So I think this Texan defense is going to dominate. Now, on the flip side, the offense for the Texans, they've been solid with 23 points per game, and I think that should continue against the Colts defense, allowing 28 points per game on their 6-game losing streak. Oh, it's actually a 6-game losing streak. I said 5 games before, so sorry about that. But I'm going to take the Texans to get the win here. I don't really think this game is that close. I think the offense plays well against a bad defense, and I think the defense dominates an inexperienced quarterback. So I've got the Texans with the win by a score of 26-7. Up next, we got the Jets at the Bills. This game probably is going to be very good because the Jets, they're terrible as they're 3-13, and the Bills, they're pretty good as they're 11-5. While the Bills did not play very well last week as they lost the Eagles 13-12. But the Bills, they get a great opportunity to bounce back this week because the Jets, they're not very good, and they just lost the Patriots last week by a score 42-10. But the offense for the Bills last week, they were not good, just 12 points. But I think they're going to bounce back in a big way this week against a terrible Jets defense. Although there is a chance the Bills do rest some offensive starter like Josh Allen, because he has been battling a foot injury over the past couple weeks. Although I do think they are going to play them. Now, on the flip side, the defense for the Bills has been pretty inconsistent so far this season, but I also expect the defense to play pretty well, because the Jets, they're starting Brady Cook for the 4th straight game, and in his 3 games so far, he's thrown 1 touchdown and 7 interceptions. But I don't really think this game is that close. I think the Bills dominate, and they win by a score 31-10. Up next, we got the Lions at the Bears. So I think this game should be pretty good, because even though the Lions are eliminated from the playoffs, I still think they're going to come out and try to win this game, because obviously you always want to win. Plus, they don't want to end the year on a 4-game losing streak, and they also want to be a division rival. But this game should be pretty good, because both these offenses are going to put up a ton of points. Because the offense for the Lions, they're scoring 27.9 points per game, and the Bears, they're scoring 26.6 points per game. And they're also great last week with 38 against the 49ers. Now, the defenses for both teams aren't great. As for the Lions, they're allowing 24.8 points per game, and the Bears are also allowing 24.8 points per game. Although the interesting thing here is the Bears defense forced a ton of turnovers, as they forced 32 on the season, which is most in the NFL, but the Lions offense doesn't really turn the ball over, as they have the 5th fewest turnovers in the NFL, although last week turning the ball over was a major problem for the Lions, as they turned it over 6 times. So that could definitely be a problem if they can turn it over again. But this is a game that could go either way. I think we're going to see a ton of points scored, and I could see the Lions outscoring the Bears, but I'm going to take the Bears to get the win. They've been the better team as of late, even though they did lose last week, but the Lions, they've lost 3 in a row. But I got the Bears with the win. They've been playing a little bit better as of late. They're also at home, and I've got the Bears with the win, 34-28. Up next, we've got the Chargers at the Broncos. The Broncos, they're 13-3, and they'll clinch the top seed in the AFC with the win. And they face the Chargers, who are 11-5. And Chargers currently have the 6th seed in the AFC, but they can finish as the 5, 6, or 7 seed in the conference. But despite them still having some seeding to play for, they're resting some starters, so I do think this should be a pretty easy win for the Broncos. But because the Chargers are resting starters, Trey Lance will get the start at quarterback, and I think we'll have a pretty rough game. Because not only does he face an elite Broncos defense, but he also has to play behind a non-existent offensive line against the defense that leads the NFL in sacks. So he's going to have a pretty tough game. Now, the offense for the Broncos, they've been okay. They're scoring about 24 points per game on the season, although last week they weren't great, with just 20 points against the Chiefs. But they do face the Chargers defense that is pretty good, but I think the Broncos should be able to score because the Chargers are probably resting key defensive starters. But I'm going to take the Broncos to get the win here fairly easily. They have played their fair share of close games against teams who they should probably beat by a lot more, and I think that could be a game like that this week, considering the Chargers are resting starters. But I'm going to take the Broncos to get the win pretty easily. I think they don't have a problem easily beating the Chargers, and I've got them with the win 31-13. Up next, we've got the Chiefs at the Raiders. This game is going to be terrible. The Raiders, they might be the worst team in the NFL, and right now they are the worst team, as they've got the first pick in the draft. And the Chiefs, they're not much better, and they're starting Chris Oladokun at quarterback once again. But this game is not going to be good. Neither offense is good, as the Raiders are scoring just 14 points per game, and the Chiefs, they've combined for 19 points over their last 2 games. Now, defensively for the Chiefs, they're still decent, and they were good last week holding the Broncos to 20 points, while the Raiders' defense is one of the worst in the NFL. So I'm going to take the Chiefs to get the win here because of their defense, but I wouldn't be too surprised if the Raiders did get the win, especially because they're at home. But I also don't think the Raiders want to win this game. They want to lock up that first pick. I think that ends up happening. I got the Chiefs with the win and a low-scoring game, 20-10. Up next, we got the Cardinals at the Rams. So the Rams, they're 11-5, and they're locked into the 6th seed in the NFC. But despite being locked into the 6th seed, after their bad performance last week against the Falcons, they're going to be playing some starters this week to try to get back on track, which I kind of like the move. Even though they don't have anything to play for, you do risk injury. But get your team's positive momentum going into the next week, into the playoffs. Kind of like the move for the Rams. And I think they should be able to have a pretty easy game this week. And they might even be able to rest starters in the second half. Because the Cardinals, they're pretty bad. They're 3-13, and they've lost 8 games in a row. Now, the Rams' offense, they've been great. They didn't play that well last week, but I think they have a great bounce-back game against defense, going over 28 points per game. And I think the Rams' defense also plays pretty well. Against the Cardinals' offense, that's nothing too impressive. But I don't have a ton to say about this game. We've already seen the Rams beat the Cardinals 45-17. I think this is another blowout. This time we've got the Rams 37-17. Up next, we got the Dolphins at the Patriots. The Patriots, they're 13-3, and coming off a dominant win over the Jets. And they could get the number 1 seed in the AFC with a win and a Broncos loss. And then I faced the Dolphins, who were 7-9, although got a pretty solid win last week because they beat the Buccaneers. But the Dolphins, they're starting Quinn Ewers for the third game in a row, and he's actually pretty solid last week, throwing 2 touchdowns. But Ewers and the Dolphins offense, they don't get a pretty tough matchup against the Patriots defense, while just 19 points per game. And they're also a top 10 defense against the pass. Now, on the flip side, the offense for the Patriots dominated last week with 42 points, and I think they'll play pretty well once again against a Dolphins defense that's nothing amazing, allowing about 24 points per game. But I got the Patriots with the win here. They're the better overall team by quite a bit. They're also at home, and I've got them with the win 33-14. Up next, we got the Commanders at the Eagles. This game probably not going to be very good. The Eagles, they're 11-5, and they'll have either the 2 seed or the 3 seed in the NFC. And the Commanders, they're 4-12, and starting Josh Johnson at quarterback for the second week in a row. But I think this game could actually be somewhat close because, 1, the Eagles don't really blow teams out, and 2, they're resting starters. So Tanner McKee will get the start at quarterback for the Eagles, and it'll be the second year in a row he gets the start in Week 18. But McKee and the Eagles offense, they face a pretty bad Commander defense that's allowing 27.1 points per game. Now on the other side, obviously as I said a second ago, Josh Johnson gets the start at quarterback for the Commanders, and he wasn't great last week against the Cowboys, although the offense actually wasn't terrible, still scoring 23 points. Now that was against the Cowboys defense, who's awful, and this week they do have to face a much better Eagles defense, who's one of the better defenses in the NFL. But I really have no idea who's going to win this game because the Eagles are resting starters. I'm still going to take the Eagles to get the win because they're still probably a slightly better team and they're at home, but I got no idea, but I'll take the Eagles 21-17. And our final game, got the Ravens at the Steelers on Sunday Night Football. And we'll have a live watch for this game starting by 8:15 Eastern Time on Sunday, so I hope to see you guys there. But this is a huge game. The winner of this game will win the AFC North and make the playoffs as the 4 seed in the AFC. And this game should be pretty interesting, because the offense for the Ravens, they've been pretty good, scoring 25 points per game. And last week they were great, scoring 41, and Derrick Henry was insane with over 200 yards and 4 touchdowns. And the Ravens offense also gets Lamar Jackson back from injury after he missed last week's game with a back injury. But the offense for the Ravens, they face the Steelers defense decent, as they're allowing 22.7 points per game, and they also get a key player back from injury, as TJ Watt returns after he missed the last couple of games with a lung injury. Now on the flip side, the offense for the Steelers, they're okay, as they're scoring 23.2 points per game on the season, but last week they were awful, as they scored just 6 points and did not find the end zone. And they're going to need to be a lot better this week, because they face a Ravens defense that's not elite, but they're decent, as they're only allowing about 23 points per game. But this is a game that I definitely think can go either way. Now we saw the Steelers win the first matchup, winning 27-22, and that game was in Baltimore. So now that the Steelers are home, they can definitely get the win, but I don't think the Steelers are that great. I don't think they're good enough to sweep the Ravens here. Plus the Steelers, they're going to go 9-8, and if they lose that game, or if they lose this game, they'll be 9-8. So I'm going to take the Ravens. I just trust them a little bit more. I think they're the better team. I think Derrick Henry runs the ball pretty well once again because he's been on a tear recently. And I've got the Ravens with the win. And they punch their ticket to the playoffs, and they win by a score of 23-17. But those are my Week 18 NFL predictions. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like this video, subscribe, turn notifications. I do my best to post as often as possible. Be sure to check out the post tab on my channel, where you guys can vote on who you think wins some of these big games. But that's all for this video. I do my best to post as often as possible, and I will see you in the next video.